The village still slept under a blanket of stars when Bernardo stepped outside, his boots crunching softly on the frost-covered ground. Winter mornings in Patagonia always arrived slowly, the sun taking its time to warm the earth. He blew into his cupped hands, watching his breath curl into the icy air like smoke from a chimney. The old blue Volvo waited patiently in the driveway, its roof rack loaded with suitcases and supplies. Bernardo gave the final strap an extra tug, testing its strength. The car wasn't much to look at. Its bumper dangled precariously from a tangle of wire, and the paint had faded to the color of a stormy sky. But it had carried their family through countless adventures. Never once had it left them stranded. From inside the house, laughter spilled through the kitchen window, golden and warm against the cold morning. 12-year-old Mateo's mischievous voice carried clearly, "She's not looking," followed by the sharp slap of a wooden spoon against skin. Bernardo smiled to himself as he peered through the window. His wife stood at the stove, her dark hair piled messily atop her head, stirring a pot of something that smelled like home. Mateo, ever the opportunist, had already stolen 3 slices of chorizo from the breakfast table, his cheeks bulging like a chipmunk's. Little Lucia, barely tall enough to see over the table, shrieked in protest, her tiny fists pounding her brother's arm. By the front door, Talero sat like a sentry, his tail thumping a steady rhythm against the tiles. The big German shepherd's ears twitched at every sound, the clatter of plates, the sizzle of chorizo in the pan, the zipping of suitcases being closed upstairs. His dark eyes never left Bernardo's face through the glass. "We're going today," those eyes seemed to say. "Finally, our adventure." Bernardo winked at him, and Talero's tail beat faster, his entire backside wiggling with excitement. Inside, Elena handed Bernardo a steaming mug of mate, the bitter herbal tea they drank every morning. The warmth seeped into his fingers as he cradled the cup. "You packed extra blankets?" she asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Carlos says the roads past Rio Negro are sheets of ice this time of year." Bernardo sipped the tea, letting its earthy flavor wake him up. "We'll take it slow, just a quick visit. In by dinner tomorrow, out by Sunday." His brother Carlos lived 8 hours south in a farming town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. To the kids, it might as well have been paradise, endless fields to run through, sheep to chase much to the shepherd's annoyance, and Uncle Carlos's wild stories by the fireplace at night. Under the table, a cold nose pressed against Bernardo's knee, Talero stared up at him, his big brown eyes full of unspoken worry. "Don't forget me," as if he ever could. Bernardo discreetly slipped the dog a chunk of cheese from his plate. Talero swallowed it in one gulp, then licked Bernardo's fingers clean. Elena pretended not to notice, but the corner of her mouth twitched. An hour later, the Volvo had transformed into a life-sized puzzle. Suitcases, blankets, and grocery bags stuffed with filled every available space. Talero waited by the back door, his leash clamped proudly in his jaws, his entire body vibrating with excitement. "Shotgun," Lucia shouted, quickly climbing into the front seat. Mateo complained, "She always gets the front." "That's because she doesn't kick my seat the whole time," Bernardo said, playfully messing up his son's hair. "You and Talero have a big job. Protect the snacks in the back." The dog didn't need to be told twice. He jumped into the back seat and snuggled into a pile of blankets between the coolers. His nose wiggled as he smelled beef empanadas, his favorite snack. Elena stayed on the porch, arms crossed in the chilly air. The weather report said, "We'll be okay," Bernardo cut in softly. He kissed her forehead, noticing the salty taste of her skin and the light flowery smell of her hair. "If the weather gets bad, we'll come back." She still looked worried, but she squeezed his hand, a quiet sign that she'd be thinking about them until they got home. As the car started, Talero hung his head out the window, tongue hanging out excitedly. Their trip was just beginning, but none of them knew it would be their last morning together, not the way things were supposed to be. The old Volvo's engine sputtered to life, shaking the car like a wet dog. Bernardo adjusted the rearview mirror and saw his son Mateo, fighting for space with Talero in the back seat. The big German shepherd had made himself a cozy spot in the blankets between the coolers, but now he stood with his paws on the center console, panting loudly in Bernardo's ear. "Down, boy," Bernardo laughed, scratching Talero's ears. The dog wagged his tail, bumping Mateo's leg before finally settling back. Elena stood on the porch, hugging her sweater tight against the cold. She waved goodbye, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Bernardo knew that look. She would worry until they got home safely. He blew her a kiss through the windshield, and she rolled her eyes, but her smile grew warmer. Lucia, Bernardo's daughter, flipped through an old map on her lap. "First, we drive south on Route 40, she said seriously. "Then we turn at the big rock that looks like a llama." "That's not a real thing," Mateo argued, kicking her seat. "Yes, it is. Dad said so last time." Bernardo smiled as he drove onto the dirt road. The Volvo bounced over potholes, creaking loudly. Behind him, Talero sniffed the air. The smell of Elena's beef empanadas filled the car, making everyone hungry. "Pass me one, will you?" Bernardo asked, keeping his eyes on the road. Mateo dug into the bag and pulled out a slightly squashed empanada. "They're still warm." Talero's ears perked up at the sound of crinkling paper. "Nice try," Bernardo said, breaking off a piece for Lucia before taking a bite. The crispy crust broke apart, revealing the spicy beef inside. "Your mom really made these extra good." For the first hour, they drove past golden fields and snowy mountains. Bernardo hummed along to a sad folk song on the radio while Lucia sang loudly and badly. Even Mateo joined in, his voice cracking on the high notes. Talero stuck his head out the window, his ears flapping in the wind. Then he turned back and tried to sneak food from the bags when he thought no one was looking. "Talero," Mateo scolded, pulling him away. "Those are for Uncle Carlos." The dog sighed and flopped down, resting his head on Mateo's knee with big, begging eyes. Mateo lasted only a few seconds before giving him a piece of chorizo. By mid-morning, the sun had warmed the land, turning the grassy plains bright gold and green. Lucia pressed her face to the window as a herd of guanacos, wild animals like llamas, ran beside the road. "Look, Talero," she shouted. The dog jumped onto Mateo's lap, barking and pawing at the window. His breath fogged up the glass. "Ew!" Mateo wiped the slobber off with his sleeve. Bernardo laughed. "Remember last year when he almost jumped out chasing sheep?" Mateo grinned. Uncle Carlos was so mad. The happy memory made the car feel even warmer. Bernardo loved his wild little family, Lucia's excitement, Mateo's hidden smiles, and even Talero's sneaky food stealing. As they passed the last familiar spot, an old broken fence, Bernardo felt the thrill of adventure. The road ahead was empty and full of possibilities. Behind them, home grew smaller in the mirror. Suddenly, Lucia gasped. "Dad, look!" 2 huge condors, black birds with giant wings, circled above the road. Bernardo slowed down as they drove under them, their shadows flickering on the windshield. "It's a good sign," Lucia whispered. Mateo rolled his eyes. "They're just birds, weirdo." But Bernardo saw Mateo watching the condors until they were out of sight. Even Talero tilted his head, curious. The road started climbing into the hills, and the car's engine groaned. Bernardo shifted gears, making a grinding noise, another thing to fix later. "Who wants to play the license plate game?" Lucia asked, pulling out paper and crayons. Mateo groaned. "We haven't seen another car in forever." "Fine, then we'll count guanacos. I bet I find more than you." As the two argued playfully, Talero curled up in his blankets, happy. His belly was full of stolen chorizo. His favorite people were with him, and new smells blew in through the window dot right now. Everything in his world was perfect. The sun was dipping low in the sky, painting everything in golden light, when Bernardo first felt something wrong with their old Volvo. Without warning, the car shook violently, like a horse suddenly trying to throw off its rider. Without warning, the car shook, the steering wheel trembled in Bernardo's hands, and the engine made a terrible choking sound, like it was struggling to breathe. In the back seat, Lucia was in the middle of telling a funny story about her school friends. She stopped suddenly. "Papa?" she asked, her voice small and worried. Bernardo forced himself to sound calm. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said, even as his fingers gripped the wheel tighter. He lifted his foot from the gas pedal, listening as the engine wheezed and groaned. Then, clunk, a loud, scary noise came from deep inside the car, like someone had dropped a heavy metal pipe. The sound echoed through the whole vehicle. The Volvo gave one last shudder and then died completely. Bernardo's heart sank as the car slowly rolled to a stop right in the middle of the empty highway. He turned the key again, click, click, but nothing happened. No engine noise, not even a cough, just silence. In the back seat, their big brown dog Talero let out a worried whine. His ears flattened against his head as he sniffed the air nervously. Bernardo's son Mateo leaned forward, his face pale in the rearview mirror. "Did we just—" "Yeah," Bernardo admitted, running a hand through his messy hair. "We're out of gas." The words seemed to hang in the air like a bad smell. Lucia quickly unbuckled and kneeled on her seat to look out the back window. "But Papa, the last gas station was so far back," she cried. Stepping out of the car, Bernardo felt the cool afternoon breeze on his face. It carried a faint icy smell from the faraway Andes Mountains. He looked around, no houses, no other cars, just endless open land in every direction. He remembered his wife Elena's warning that morning, "Be careful after Rio Negro, the roads get icy." They hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The nearest town was at least 45 minutes behind them. Then he felt a small, cold hand slip into his. Lucia stood beside him, her bottom lip quivering. "Papa, what do we do now?" she asked quietly. Bernardo forced a smile and squeezed her hand. "We wait for a kind person to help us, my love," he said. But as he spoke, his eyes searched the empty road. No cars coming, no lights, just the darkening sky where the first stars were starting to appear. Talero pressed against Bernardo's leg, warm and comforting. The big dog then licked Lucia's cheek, making her giggle weakly despite her fear. Bernardo checked his watch. 2 hours until full darkness. He could already feel the temperature dropping. From somewhere far away came the lonely cry of a condor, a wild echoing sound that sent shivers down his spine. The cold air sneaked into the car like a thief, making everyone shiver. Bernardo kept checking his watch, 5:32, 5:47, 6:03, but time seemed to move slower and slower. Only 2 cars had passed by in the last hour, and neither stopped to help. Lucia curled up under a blanket in the front seat, her teeth chattering. "Papa, my toes are freezing." Bernardo reached over and rubbed her feet through her thick socks, the ones Mama Elena had made her wear that morning. "Just hang on a little longer, sweetheart," he said, trying to sound brave. In the back seat, Mateo was unusually quiet, hugging his knees to his chest. Their big dog Talero had squeezed between the kids, sharing his warmth like a furry heater. The dog kept licking Mateo's hands, as if trying to say, "Don't worry, I'm here." Elena broke the silence. "We can't stay here all night," she said quietly. She was trying to sound calm for the kids, but Bernardo saw the fear in her eyes when she looked at the darkening sky. Bernardo took a deep breath, watching his breath fog up the windshield. He knew what they had to do, and the thought made his stomach twist. "Elena," he said softly, "you and the kids should stay with the car. Turn the heater on for just a few minutes at a time to save gas." Elena grabbed his arm tightly. "And what about you?" "I'm going to walk back to that farmhouse we passed. That's miles away," Elena whispered sharply. "And it's getting dark. I'll take Talero with me." Hearing his name, the dog's ears perked up. "We'll move faster alone." They didn't say the scary thought out loud. The kids wouldn't make it walking that far in the freezing cold. Suddenly, Lucia sat up straight. "I want to go with you and Talero." Bernardo cupped her cold face in his hands. "I need you to be brave and stay with Mama. You're in charge of keeping Mateo out of trouble, okay?" Mateo made a grumpy noise, but he didn't argue. His lips were starting to look a little blue. Elena's eyes were shiny as she handed Bernardo their last empanada and a water bottle. 2 hours, she said firmly. "If you're not back by then—" "I will be," Bernardo promised. He kissed her quickly. Her cheeks were wet with tears. Talero wagged his tail when Bernardo put on his leash, thinking this was just a normal walk. But as they stepped away from the car, the dog suddenly stopped. He looked back at the Volvo, at Mateo's face pressed against the window, at Lucia's tiny hand waving goodbye. For a long moment, Talero refused to move. His paws stayed planted in the dirt, his muscles tense. Bernardo had never seen him refuse to go for a walk before. "Come on, buddy," Bernardo whispered, giving the leash a gentle pull. With one last look at the car, Talero finally started walking. But instead of running ahead like usual, he stayed right by Bernardo's side, his furry shoulder brushing against Bernardo's leg with every step. It was like he was saying, "I'm with you, we'll do this together." The sun disappeared behind them as man and dog walked down the empty road. Their shadows stretched long across the pavement, then vanished into the darkness. The first snowflakes landed softly on Bernardo's cheeks like cold whispers. He blinked as they melted against his skin, their icy touch a warning he couldn't ignore. "Looks like we'll need to hurry, boy," he said, giving Talero's leash a gentle tug. The German shepherd paused, his black nose twitching as he sniffed the wind. His ears swiveled forward, then back, catching sounds Bernardo couldn't hear. A low whine escaped his throat. Bernardo squinted through the gathering dusk. The farmhouse should have been visible by now, just beyond that last rise, he told himself. But the landscape had dissolved into a blur of gray shadows and swirling snow. The flakes came faster now, no longer gentle but thick and heavy, falling with purpose. Within minutes the temperature dropped sharply. Bernardo zipped his jacket up to his chin and tucked his gloved hands under his armpits. His breath came in short, visible puffs. "Come on, Talero. Faster we walk, faster we get warm." The dog obeyed, but kept glancing back the way they'd come, as if measuring the growing distance between them and the car, between them and the children. An hour later, Bernardo's fingers had gone numb inside his gloves. The snow fell thicker now, swirling in angry gusts that moaned across the open plain. His flashlight beam reflected off the endless white, creating a disorienting tunnel of light and snowflakes. "Should have seen that damn farmhouse by now," he muttered through chattering teeth. He pulled out his phone with stiff fingers. No signal, just as he'd expected. The battery icon flashed red. 8%. Useless. He shoved it back in his pocket. Talero pressed against his leg, shivering. The dog's black and tan fur was crusted with snow, giving him the appearance of a moving snowdrift. Bernardo knelt with difficulty, his knees protesting, and rubbed the dog's ears. "You're okay, soldier. We're okay." But they weren't. The wind surged with sudden fury, snapping Bernardo's hood back like a sail. Snow stung his eyes, blinding him momentarily. When he blinked them clear, his stomach dropped. Their footprints, their only way back, had vanished completely. Panic fluttered in his chest like a trapped bird. Through the whiteout, a dark shape emerged, a cluster of jagged boulders. Bernardo stumbled toward them, Talero leading the way now, the leash taut with determination. The rocks formed a shallow overhang, not quite a cave, but enough to block the worst of the wind. Bernardo collapsed against the stone, gasping. His jeans were soaked through from the knees down, the fabric stiffening as the water froze. Talero shook himself vigorously, spraying snow in all directions, then immediately curled into Bernardo's lap. The dog's warmth seeped through Bernardo's clothes, a small but vital comfort. "Smart thinking," Bernardo praised, scratching behind the dog's ears. Talero responded by licking Bernardo's wrist, his tongue surprisingly warm against frozen skin. For a while they simply sat there, listening to the storm scream past their meager shelter. Bernardo fished the last empanada from his pocket, now frozen solid, and broke it in half with difficulty. He gave the larger piece to Talero. "Happy Thanksgiving," Bernardo joked weakly as the dog devoured it in 2 bites. As night deepened, so did the cold. Bernardo's shivering grew violent, his teeth clattering like castanets. He hugged Talero closer, burying his hands in the dog's dense undercoat. The German shepherd tolerated this invasion with a sigh, resting his chin on Bernardo's thigh. Thump, thump, thump. Talero's tail beat against the ground twice. Still here. Bernardo's watch read 11:17 p.m. The storm showed no sign of relenting. He thought of Elena and the kids back in the car. Were they warm enough? Had someone found them? The guilt twisted in his gut like a knife. A particularly fierce gust howled through the rocks, driving snow into their shelter. Talero growled at it, as if challenging the weather itself to a fight. "Yeah, tell 'em, boy," Bernardo murmured. His words slurred slightly. Bernardo blinked. Had he dozed off? The world seemed softer at the edges now, the cold less biting. Some distant part of his brain recognized this as dangerous, hypothermia setting in. But the thought drifted away like smoke. Talero sensed it first. The dog stood abruptly, whining deep in his throat. When Bernardo didn't respond, Talero nudged his chest with such force that Bernardo nearly toppled over. "Hey!" Bernardo caught himself. Talero stared at him intently, ears flat against his skull. "Stay awake." Bernardo forced himself upright. Okay, I'm up." He fumbled with numb fingers for his flashlight. The beam was weaker now, but it illuminated enough to see. The snow had piled nearly 2 feet high around their shelter. They were being buried alive. Bernardo knew then. They couldn't stay. "Talero," he said, voice rough. "We have to move." The dog didn't need convincing. He was already standing at the edge of their shelter, sniffing the wind. Bernardo's legs protested as he stood, stiff and uncooperative, but he managed to stagger forward. Outside their rocky cocoon, the storm raged with renewed fury. Snow lashed horizontally, stinging any exposed skin. Bernardo tied Talero's leash around his wrist in a clumsy knot. If they got separated now, "Find help," Bernardo ordered, though he wasn't sure the dog could hear him over the wind. "Go on, boy, find help." Talero hesitated only a second before plunging forward into the white void, Bernardo stumbling behind like a broken marionette. They'd gone maybe 200 meters when Bernardo's boot caught on something hidden beneath the snow. He fell hard, face first into a drift. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Talero was at his side instantly, pawing at his shoulder. Bernardo rolled onto his back, gasping. The sky wheeled above him, a dizzying carousel of snow and darkness. So tired. Talero barked sharply, then began tugging at Bernardo's jacket sleeve with his teeth. "Get up. Get up." Bernardo tried. He really did. But his body had reached its limit. His vision tunneled. The last thing he felt was Talero's warm weight settling across his chest as the dog positioned himself like a living blanket. Then everything went quiet. The wind screamed through the rocks like an angry ghost. Talero lay on top of Bernardo, shaking, not just from the cold, but from working so hard to keep his human warm. Snow had frozen into his fur, making tiny ice crystals that sparkled when the moon peeked through the clouds. Underneath him, Bernardo's breathing had become slow and weak. Talero kept licking his face, his rough tongue moving over cold skin. No response. Only the small warm puffs from Bernardo's nose told Talero his human was still alive. "Wake up," Talero whined, pushing Bernardo's cheek with his wet nose. "Please wake up." The night seemed to last forever. Talero kept moving, lying on Bernardo to warm him, then getting up to walk in small circles around their tiny shelter. His paws hurt from the cold, but he kept trampling the snow so it wouldn't bury them. Around midnight, the wind changed and snow blew right into their hiding spot. Talero turned his back to the storm, blocking the snow from Bernardo's face. Ice stuck to his eyelashes. His fur puffed up as big as it could to trap warmth. Suddenly Talero remembered that morning in the warm kitchen. Elena sneaking him spicy sausage under the table. The kids laughing while packing their bags. Lucia always sharing her last bite with him. Talero lifted his nose to the sky and howled. It wasn't a sad sound. It was a shout to the whole world. "Help us, we're here." But the wind stole his voice away. Tired, Talero lay back on Bernardo, licking his frozen hands. He remembered playing ball with Mateo last summer, Lucia brushing his fur for hours while singing badly, Bernardo scratching that perfect spot behind his ears. Morning came slowly, the sky turning gray but bringing no warmth. Talero's stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since that tiny piece of frozen empanada. He could feel his ribs under his messy fur. Then he saw movement. A skinny coyote stood watching them just outside the rocks. Its yellow eyes stared hungrily at Bernardo. Talero jumped up instantly, showing all his teeth. A deep growl came from his chest, the kind that made other dogs run away. The coyote hesitated. It was smaller than Talero, with its ribs showing, but a hungry animal is a dangerous animal. Talero snapped his jaws right in front of the coyote's nose. His meaning was clear: "Go away. This ISS my family." The coyote turned and disappeared into the snow. Talero went back to Bernardo, his whole body hurting. He gave Bernardo one more lick before curling around him tightly. He had to stay strong. Somewhere beyond the storm, the sun was rising. Somewhere, Elena and the kids were waiting. Talero let his eyes close, just for a little rest. The wind kept screaming. Everything was white. Bernardo blinked snow from his frozen eyelashes. Talero kept pushing against him, cold nose poking his neck, his ribs, his stiff hands. Okay, boy," Bernardo mumbled, his words slow and thick. It took all his strength to roll over. His muscles screamed in protest. The leash was still tied to his wrist, cutting into skin he couldn't feel anymore. Talero danced impatiently, tail straight with urgency. Those golden eyes screamed, "Get up!" Bernardo's gloves scraped ice as he pushed himself up. His arms shook like leaves. The world spun wildly. He almost blacked out again. Then Talero pressed close, his warm body steadying Bernardo. For just a second, the cold didn't seem so bad. "Good boy," Bernardo breathed, fingers buried in Talero's thick fur. The storm roared around them. Overnight, snow had piled up to his knees. Bernardo squinted, nothing but swirling white in every direction. Talero pulled hard on the leash, his whole body shaking with purpose. Bernardo took one shaky step, then another. His boots felt like blocks of ice. Every movement sent sharp pains up his legs. "Find help," he rasped. "Go, Talero." The dog lunged forward, muscles straining. Bernardo stumbled after him like a broken puppet. After only 20 steps, Bernardo's legs collapsed. He crashed to his knees with a groan. Talero rushed back, whining as he licked Bernardo's face. "Just need." "A minute," Bernardo panted, but the cold didn't wait. It clawed at his lungs with each breath. His fingers in Talero's fur had turned ghostly white. Suddenly, Talero's ears shot up. His nose twitched wildly at the wind. Before Bernardo could ask why, the dog was pulling like crazy, claws scratching ice. "What?" Bernardo forced himself up, following Talero's stare. Nothing but white, then a dark shape. Rocks? A tree? Talero's bark cut through the wind. He pulled harder, practically dragging Bernardo. Step by painful step, the shape became a low stone wall. Old farm ruins, not rescue, but shelter. Bernardo collapsed behind it, gasping. Talero immediately curled around him, sharing warmth. "Good job," Bernardo slurred. His numb fingers fumbled at his pocket. Maybe one last bit of food. His hand touched something smooth. The photo. With clumsy fingers, he pulled it out. The family picture Elena had tucked in his pocket that morning. All of them smiling on Lucia's birthday. Talero wearing a silly party hat. Tears froze on Bernardo's cheeks. Talero nosed the photo, then licked Bernardo's face. With surprising gentleness, the dog took the picture in his teeth and tucked it safely inside Bernardo's jacket. Then Talero stood, shaking off snow. He gave Bernardo one last look, full of love and determination, before turning toward the storm. "Wait!" Bernardo's hand grabbed empty air. Talero was gone. The wind howled louder, angry at this betrayal. Bernardo tried to stand, to call out, but his body wouldn't move. As darkness crept in, Bernardo held the photo close. Somewhere in that white hell, his brave dog was fighting the storm. For his family. Always for his family. Morning light slowly spread across the frozen land, turning the dark sky pale gray. The terrible snowstorm had finally ended, leaving behind a world covered in perfect, silent white. Talero, the German shepherd, stood like a statue over Bernardo's still body. His fur was matted, his ribs showing through his sides. He was weak from hunger and cold, but he refused to leave his human. Again and again, he licked Bernardo's face, clearing away the frost that kept forming on his eyelashes and beard. "Wake up," Talero whined softly, nudging Bernardo's shoulder with his nose. "Please, wake up." But Bernardo didn't move. Then, a sound. Talero's ears shot up. His head turned sharply toward the trees. A coyote, skinny and desperate, stepped out from the bushes. Its yellow eyes locked onto Bernardo, seeing an easy meal. Talero didn't hesitate. In an instant, he planted himself between the coyote and Bernardo. His lips curled back, showing sharp teeth. A deep, warning growl rolled from his chest. His fur stood up along his back, making him look even bigger. "This one is mine," his growl said. "You can't have him." The coyote froze, watching. It was hungry, starving even. But Talero was bigger, stronger, and he would fight to the death to protect Bernardo. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with a nervous yip, the coyote turned and slunk back into the trees. Talero didn't relax. He watched, sniffing the air, until he was sure the danger was gone. Only then did he return to Bernardo's side. He circled 3 times, like dogs do when they make a nest, then laid down, pressing his warm body against Bernardo's chest. The sun rose higher. Talero's ears twitched at every sound, the cry of a hawk, the whisper of wind through frozen grass. Each time he lifted his head, hoping for help, but no one came. His stomach growled. He was so hungry. He forced himself to stand, limping a few feet away to chew on frozen grass. It did nothing to fill his belly. Then he smelled something, a mouse nest buried under the snow. He dug frantically, his paws numb from the cold. No mice, just a few frozen acorns. Still, he carried them back to Bernardo and dropped them near his hand. "Here, eat. You need to wake up." But Bernardo didn't take them. Talero whimpered, licking Bernardo's face again. Then he curled up against him, sharing what little warmth he had left. He wouldn't leave, no matter what. The sound started as a faint vibration in Talero's chest, barely noticeable beneath his matted fur. His head lifted from Bernardo's shoulder, ears twitching as the strange sensation grew stronger. A low, rhythmic thumping pulsed through the frozen air. Not the wind, not an animal, but something mechanical, something new. Talero staggered to his feet, his joints stiff from days of immobility. The vibration became a sound. The sound became a roar, and suddenly the white sky was filled with a monstrous black shape. The helicopter's blades churned the snow into swirling eddies as it circled overhead, its searchlight cutting through the gathering dusk like a blade. For the first time in 23 days, Talero barked with all his remaining strength. The sound tore from his raw throat, more of a croak than a proper bark, but he kept at it, sharp, insistent yelps that made his lungs burn. He danced around Bernardo's body, tail stiff with desperate energy, his paws leaving frantic patterns in the snow. "Here, we're here." The helicopter tilted sideways, its spotlight locking onto them. Talero stood his ground against the deafening noise and blowing snow, positioning himself squarely over Bernardo as the aircraft descended. When the skids touched down 30 meters away, the dog didn't run toward this strange machine like he normally might have. Instead, he pressed closer to Bernardo, licking his human's frozen face as if trying to rouse him for their rescuers. Two figures emerged from the helicopter, their orange suits bright against the white landscape. Talero's muscles tensed as they approached, a low growl rumbling in his chest despite his exhaustion. "Easy, boy," the lead rescuer said, moving slowly as he knelt in the snow. "We're here to help." The man's gloves smelled of coffee and fuel as he reached out. Talero sniffed cautiously, his nose brushing against frozen fabric. Some deep instinct told him these were good hands, hands that smelled like the vet who had fixed his paw last summer, like the fireman who had given him treats during the village festival. Behind them, the second rescuer was checking Bernardo. Talero whined when the man shook his head and said something into his radio. "Let's get you out of here, huh?" The first rescuer murmured, sliding his hands under Talero's belly. The dog's legs buckled immediately. He hadn't realized how weak he'd become. As he was lifted, Talero twisted in the man's arms, straining to keep Bernardo in sight. The helicopter's interior was a blur of noise and strange smells. Talero whimpered as they wrapped him in a crinkly silver blanket, but quieted when he saw them carefully loading Bernardo beside him. A woman with kind eyes pressed something warm against his paw, an IV, though he didn't know the word, and suddenly the world softened at the edges. As the helicopter lifted off, Talero managed one last lick to Bernardo's motionless hand. Then exhaustion overtook him, and he slept, really slept, for the first time in weeks, dreaming of a warm kitchen and children's laughter. Below them, the snowfield shrank into the distance, their lonely shelter already disappearing beneath fresh snowfall. But Talero didn't see it. He was already home. Talero survived. He came home to Elena, Matteo, and Lucia. They buried Bernardo under his favorite oak tree. Talero never fully recovered. His joints hurt in the cold. He moved slower. But every morning he walked to the oak tree and lay down beside it, waiting. Lucia would sit with him sometimes, petting his fur. "He's not coming back, Talero," she'd whisper. But Talero stayed anyway, because true love doesn't end, not even with death. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you in the next adventure.